Now, with that being said, we are going to go ahead and go position by position here, talking about plays in each tier that we like or stand out. This is the first time Josh and I have looked at the slate for week 5, and we'll probably just recap kind of what happened last week and talking about these players. The first thing that stands out to me is that we do have two guys that are above 10,000 in Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey probably not going to play next week against Philly, which is probably, unfortunately, a good matchup for him. So let's go ahead and start, though, by talking about the quarterbacks here, because now we finally can see who's on the slate. The Chiefs, not on the slate, and the Ravens, not on the slate once again. So, yeah, you want to just start off at the top and what you like here?
Yeah, for sure. Let me get this pulled up in front of myself as well. Give me 1 second. Getting into FanDuel, getting NFL, full roster. Sorry, I should have had this pulled up in
Oh, no, it's
advance.
so good. I can actually start if you want.
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead and start here.
All right, so we have 5 guys above 8,000. They are Kyler Murray, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Aaron Rodgers. First thing that sticks out to me are there are two quarterbacks that are, uh, they're more mobile than the rest in Hurts and Kyler. Kyler faces San Francisco in a divisional matchup in Arizona. Jalen Hurts on the road taking on Carolina. Those two matchups stand out to me because you can poke holes in both of these guys. But I think that Kyler Murray, like Josh Allen was last week, kind of feels like the guy that people are going to lean to for cash games. Do you have any qualms about that?
I don't think so. We saw that Kyler was able to tear up this San Fran team last year, at least from a rushing perspective. I'm about to pull it up right now to make sure I am correct, but I have a pretty good feeling that he had a week against us both times he faced off versus 49ers game log FTP. So Kyler against the 49ers in his career last time had 16 FanDuel points, but in the three matchups before that had 27, 26, and 23. So I mean, if he's able to put up a week like that, which I think is definitely plausible, he's deservedly the $8,500 QB and makes sense as a cash game play.
My guess in that dud performance was probably because it was probably at the end of, closer to the end of the year last year, and that was when they were falling apart and he was hurt. So
Yep.
I think that's kind of what that one was. So for me, obviously you were not happy with the last 2 weeks of Kyler Murray production against Jacksonville, 19 FanDuel points, and Rams, 22 FanDuel points. But the rush attempts were still there. The pass attempts were still there. Rams are a very, very, very tough defense. Now he gets a home matchup for the first time in 3 weeks, and I think we're going to see something similar towards that 30-point production. Now, yeah, I have nothing bad to say about Kyler. I just think that his ceiling we haven't seen in a while. It's been 2 weeks. I say a while, but like he's had back-to-back 30-point games in the first 2 weeks of the season. Now he gets a much easier matchup than the Rams and the Niners. Anything you want to talk about for your defense?
Um, Not really. I mean, we look fine. We don't look great. We looked really good during the first half last week, or this past week, and then kind of crumbled apart when Russell Wilson started finding his groove. So I don't think the defense is something that you should be worried about for Kyler. I think he'll probably do just fine against this 49ers defense.
Okay. I think the other guy that people look to, I mean, Tom Brady is in a smash spot against Miami. Um, Saw Carson Wentz do pretty well against them the other day, especially Jonathan Taylor. We'll talk about the running backs for Tampa here moving forward, but Dak Prescott against the Giants is a very, very good matchup for him as well. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore Aaron Rodgers against the Bengals too. So all these guys, you can kind of find reasons to play them. I think this is a very, very good tournament slate as far as the first 5 QBs are concerned. So anything on those guys in the 8K range, or else we should just move on to the rest of them.
Yeah, when it comes, I mean, like I think you're right in saying that there's a reason to target each and every one of these guys, right? Dak has a pretty good matchup against the Giants. I worry a little bit that they're going to run the ball a lot though in that
Yep.
situation, so
Mm-hmm.
that's what would scare me. Tom Brady lead would definitely scare me in the spot against Miami. If they're up by a lot, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go to those running backs, go to the point of least resistance, which would be the run game. Hurts, I still don't know what I'm doing with this Carolina defense. I thought I was ready to fully buy into them being a really good defense, and then we saw the Dallas Cowboys absolutely torch them. So like, I think I'm still pretty 50-50 there. And then Rodgers kind of seems like he has the best matchup out of all the guys we just talked about. So
Yep.
I don't know. I think everyone above 8K, there's reasons to play each one of them. I'm not sure if I'm solidified on one guy being the cash game lock though.
Yep. I mean, I think that Jalen Hurts is a fine discount on Kyler Murray, except that it's not really a discount. It's only $400. So this is very, very encouraging. The rush attempts are averaging anywhere from 7 to 10, and he kind of has that floor with the upside of rushing touchdowns as well. The turnovers should get a little bit better as the season goes on. And obviously, we know that I think the main point of conversation here is that playing QBs against the Kansas City defense is a real thing this year. Hurts still gives you the upside of 30 plus, and the floors is pretty safe at around 20, 22. He always has that. I think the floor combination or ceiling combination of this guy is going to be something really, really special. So we'd have to keep our eyes on it. I don't know. I really, really like the Cowboys offense. So to the point of the Panthers defense being a fraud, we'll see. I think that this matchup
Yeah,
is definitely better for Carolina, but I think Jalen should be just fine on his own. That's going to be a QB spot where you don't necessarily have to stack the majority of the season.
for sure.
Okay, moving down the list here, we'll talk about the guys in the 7K range. At the top of the list is Justin Herbert at 7,700, going up against Cleveland. Don't love the matchup initially there. Down to all the way down to Joe Burrow against Green Bay. So, any of these guys stick out to you in this range?
Jeez, like I feel like quarterback is a little bit rougher this week, at least from like first look. I think Kirk makes an interesting option, but again, kind of the same conversation I just had with Brady. Point of least resistance would be to go to that run game, and they do have Dalvin Cook there, so not
Yep.
sure how much I'm willing to buy into it. Darnold would be interesting. We just saw Philly get torched on defense, and Darnold will have all those weapons, and if he continues to run the ball in, I mean, he
Yeah.
has 5 rushing touchdowns. He has more rushing touchdowns than any player in the league. If that continues to be the case, then you got to consider this guy. And it feels like 7,600 might be a little bit underpriced. When it gets to these guys at the bottom end of the 7K range, don't think I want to play Jameis. Don't really want to play Jared Goff. Derek Carr is kind of interesting, but I still think I'm staying away there, depending on what we see from him today. Tannehill maybe, but looked really rough. He would have to have one of his wide receivers back.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Heineke against New Orleans. I'm not playing against New Orleans. So like it just the 7K range, every range seems really really tough this week.
I agree. Uh, man, like Daniel Jones. Yesterday was the Saquon Barkley show, so but I give Daniel Jones a lot of credit here. He threw for over 400 yards against the Saints, which is tough to do, and he still has that rushing floor a little bit. Now I know Barkley went off yesterday, so a lot of those points went there, but again, hard to sleep on Daniel Jones. It really is, and
No.
sure the floor is scary against Atlanta of all teams, but the upside for this play is certainly something we have to take a look at for tournaments, especially on DraftKings, where he's probably under 6K or around that range. Uh, I'm not really interested in much down here. I think that they continue to disrespect Derek Carr's price tag. Uh, Tannehill bounce back is very interesting, but again, the offensive line issues for Tennessee are ever growing, and who knows what the wide receivers are going to be able to do in terms of health. So I think it's another Derrick Henry conversation. It's probably just going to be a thing all year again. I mean, for the next who like God knows how many seasons is Derrick Henry's going to be able to put up that kind of production. But it just I don't know. For me, the quarterbacks definitely seems like another pay up week. Any interest in rolling out Trey Lance if Jimmy G can't go?
100% interest. I have a ton of interest in rolling out Trey Lance in all honesty. And I think maybe I'm getting a little bit too GPP. Maybe I'm even getting a little too Homer, but this is a spot where I think Trey Lance could end up being my 4 p.m. only QB. I think having him at 6,900 is a result of the algorithm not taking into account the afternoon game, not taking into account that Trey Lance is going to be most likely the starter. I don't think Jimmy G is going to play this week. So Lance at 6,900, he has that rushing upside. We saw that he had 7 rushing attempts in one half of football
Yep.
while they were down. So like imagine like they're still going to be down most likely in this Arizona game. But like if he had 7 rushing attempts, that would put him at 14 for the whole game. And I'm not saying he's definitely getting to 14, but he could be up there. He could definitely be close to that. And if that's the case, then Lance is 100% in play, in my opinion. I think having that floor at a price tag of 6,900 is something that you don't see every day. So I really do like the Lance play. I think it's really solid. And I think there's 2 rookies in this range that you can consider. I like Mac Jones too. He gets to face off against that Texans team. He doesn't need to do much to pay off the price tag at 6,700. I mean, like he's had a tough match, a lot of tough matchups this year. I mean, back-to-back weeks against Tampa Bay and New Orleans. That's really rough. The Jets aren't a rough team. He should have had a better position. He should have had a better game there. But Miami, that secondary is at least rough. So like he's had a lot of rough matchups, and this is his first cakewalk. I think Mac Jones could potentially be in play too.
Yeah, if I had to go choose one over the other, it would definitely be Lance for me because I want that rushing upside. If I'm going to go and get, because the main thing with FanDuel always is that how much money are you actually saving versus like the upside that these players have. Now this one's going to be the way it is because of the injury. So Lance at 6,900 is a savings of about, it's not quite 3K. So sorry, not quite 2K. And if it was on DraftKings, I'm sure it's much different. But I wish it was more so that I could actually, it would make more sense for me to go there in cash.
But
We'll
see,
see.
like this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said we'll see how the news goes. But the second half numbers for Lance, and the only spot that he's played a lot of time in and been that every single down QB, was definitely encouraging from a rushing standpoint. I hope that he's a little bit more accurate, but 18 pass attempts is also really good.
Yeah, I agree. They ran a good pace, right? I mean, that's a really good pace in my opinion. The fact that he was involved in 25 plays in one half, and they were already still running the ball too. I mean, Sherman got plenty of rushes there, so like that's a good pace that San Fran team had at the end of the game there. I want to talk about one more rookie QB. I think Lawrence at 6,500. We just saw Zach Wilson absolutely dominate in this spot against this Tennessee Titans defense. Do you think we could see T-Law do the same thing?
I have a harder time getting behind Lawrence. He did well with taking care of the football last week. Had a rushing touchdown too, and I feel like the floor is getting a little bit better, but there's always a chance that he puts up that stinker and gets less than 10 FanDuel points. Uh, we'll see how it goes. I still would take Trey Lance over both of them, but yes, I do think for GPPs you can count on, you can back Lawrence. I don't have an issue with it, and now that DJ Chark's out, you have more solid options to get there. We saw how they used Laviska Shenault down the field for the first time all season, which was huge for that offense. Any love for Justin Fields if he's the starter against Vegas?
Um, I want to see what this Vegas defense is able to do today against the Chargers. I would say, as of right now, no. The fact that he's not getting over double-digit fantasy points is kind of concerning, especially
Yep.
considering like it was against Detroit last week. So no reason not to have over double-digit fantasy points. And he had 2 turnovers. It was a
Uh,
rough day for Fields, and I don't think it gets much better against the Raiders.
Definitely a step up. They will lean on David Montgomery for the majority of the season as long as he's the starter. They'll probably lean on him all the time, no matter who's the starter anyway. But Matt Nagy did come out and say that doesn't matter what happened yesterday, but Andy Dalton is their starter if he's healthy, which again keeps going back to the same stupid point. Just put Fields in there, man.
Yeah, seriously.
Anyway, let's move on. Any love for Zach Wilson versus the Falcons defense? I give a little harder time. Like he looked good yesterday. I actually can't even see where he is, so I'll find him.
He's not on the slate. He's on a
Oh,
prime
yeah.
time game.
Well, there you go. Question answered. But that's going to be really fun for me to figure out. Anyway, I might be forced to, but I think it might be like, man, who do you take between Matt Ryan and Zach Wilson? That is disgusting.
That is disgusting. That is the definition of disgusting.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think it's any quarterback against Atlanta is good. We saw what Taylor Heineke did yesterday too. Jason Garrett over Matt Nagy. Oh, it's definitely Jason Garrett, but Matt Nagy is making a name for himself. He's getting closer.
Very close.
All right, let's talk about running backs here. Derrick Henry sitting at the top at 10,400, got a $200 price bump, I believe, on FanDuel, and man, yeah, even better matchup against Jacksonville's defense. I was expecting Joe Mixon to go ballistic against the Jacksonville defense, but he did not. So again, if the wide receivers are out for Tennessee, they're just gonna, Henry's gonna get 30 plus rush attempts, and it's just gonna be like a battering ram approach where they're just gonna continue to send him through the line. And the Jets did okay. Astro Infinity, thank you so much for the sub, dude. What's going on? Good afternoon. It's just going to be one thing that we saw yesterday. The Jets defense was solid. I don't think they played a bad game. But eventually Derrick Henry is just going to get that raw number up there. And we saw him get into the end zone in the second half, and that took him over the 100-yard mark and got the bonus on DraftKings and all of that stuff, yada, yada, yada. So all of that being said, Josh, excuse me, he touched the ball 35 times and only ended up with 24 FanDuel points. Now, the rushing touchdowns, I feel like, have been a little bit inconsistent for Henry, and that's going to change moving forward. He's going to be a little bit more reliable when it comes to that. But what are we doing with Henry this week? I think the best way to approach this is we shouldn't make a decision yet because we don't know the strength of the other positions on the slate yet. But what are you leaning to right now?
I would say I'm leaning towards a fade as of right now. I think the price tag is exactly the same as it was last week. And he did enough to pay off the price tag, but as a guy who's trying to be a little bit more GPP minded on these streams, he definitely didn't do enough to get you there in GPPs. I mean, we were talking about it. We talk every Sunday morning, figuring out what we're doing with all our builds and making sure we're all finalized and talking through any news together. And we were talking about like what point are we scared of Derrick Henry? At what point does Derrick Henry end up burning us? And I think we said 30 FanDuel points, right?
Yep,
Or was it
that was when I would be like concerned. I wasn't even scared yet.
And I think
scared would be
like the 35 to get really scared of him, like
right.
of the performance he's putting on,
Exactly.
and you not having him in your lineup. So like I just don't know if he gets there. I don't know. I think these defenses are doing a really good job of realizing like, hey, the Titans aren't with either one of their receivers. We need to stack the box. They had 8 in the box for almost every play of the first drive that I watched of that Titans game. So like I think they just continue to do that. If they're smart, then again, I guess I'm giving Urban Meyer a lot of credit for being smart when we know he's not. So maybe Henry is able to break one open and end up having a huge score here. As of right now, I'm leaning towards no, but I don't think I can make the decision quite yet.
Yep, a little bit too early to tell. I totally agree with you. Let's move on. And Christian McCaffrey is not going to be playing, most likely. He shouldn't be playing in this game. So I'm going to just disregard that. Dalvin Cook against Detroit. See, this is a perfect example of the Henry conversation, right? We have 2 really, really good running back spots for Dalvin Cook against Detroit at home in Minnesota, coming off of a really bad offensive performance and loss. You have Aaron Jones going up against Cincinnati, which is another fantastic running back spot. You also have Zeke going up against the Giants in a very, very good spot. So right off the bat, I can tell you guys I feel really good about a Derrick Henry fade. How are you approaching that? Are you kind of on the same wavelength?
Yeah, definitely. I am going to also be interested to see do we get another week where Carlos Hyde's sitting? Because we saw James Robinson look amazing last week, and he's at 7,400. I like Austin. Well, no, I don't like Austin Eckler. That's a lie. I'm not going to play Austin Eckler against Cleveland, but I do like Saquon. I think Saquon looked really good this week with his
Yep.
2 touchdowns, and he looked involved in the passing game. I think that there's a ton of options here, a little bit lower than Derrick Henry, where I feel more comfortable spending my salary elsewhere. But again, we don't have Kelsey on the slate, so it's going to be interesting to see who's that pay up guy at the tight end position. A wide receiver, it's going to be interesting to see who we're going to take there. I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had about the rest of the positions before we can decide, like, is Derrick Henry the player or not?
Agreed. This screams an awesome tournament slate to me. It also screams really good cash games too, because we have much better running backs than we did last week. We were relying on a priced up Chuba Hubbard. We were relying on a 5K Mike Davis who stumbled into the end zone and didn't even hit value. By the way, I want to add that part. He would missed value by like a half point. So, yeah, just finding guys that are going to give you more than one FanDuel point through 3 quarters is definitely important. So, yeah, just we have so many good running backs in so many good spots, and Christian alluded to it. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Joe Mixon is doubtful this week against Green Bay.
Doubtful.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be dealing. Well, doubtful might not be. Maybe he's going ahead of us here, but yeah, the FanDuel says doubtful right now as the injury tag. So we'll see what goes on in practice, but I'm sure we'll be talking about his backup, Mr. P. Ryan, shortly. Down the line a little bit more, we're getting into the low sevens, high sixes. We have Chuba Hubbard against Philly at 6,700. We have DeAndre Swift, who I think is a great play at 6,900. Anybody that's kind of looking at that you're looking at down here, maybe a Damien Harris against Houston.
Antonio, well, no, not Antonio Gibson. He does have the New Orleans matchup, but we did see New Orleans not invincible when it comes to the run
Yeah,
game. So,
that
like,
was crazy.
Gibson, yeah, it was crazy, right? We usually don't see running backs being able to put on that type of performance. So, I feel like Gibson somewhat in play. I think Damien Harris 100% in play. You did really see him struggle yesterday, but to be expected against that defense, that
Exactly.
really really tough Bucks defense. Don't get discouraged off of Damien Harris quite yet. He's still in a great spot. Um, yeah, I think that's all I would lean to. I would yeah, I don't think I'd be going. And I like DeAndre Swift, like you said. 6,900, really great price tag against Minnesota. We have still yet to see a game where the where the Lions are leading, and they actually are able to use Swift in the role that they want to use him in. So, like, I don't know if that's this week, but if it is this week against the Vikings, then you could see Swift go off for a monster game.
This is the part of the stream where I or somebody will have to remind me, maybe Kai reminds me later in the week that I brought up this take. This is a perfect, exact scenario of Ezekiel Elliott from week 1. Damien Harris underperformed against Tampa, to be expected. Really gross game. Only got 4 rush attempts. That's just not how they were going to win that football game. I know that he only got 6 the week before, but again, New Orleans rush defense, respectable. James White is out for the year, and Ramondre Stevenson was out last night. J.J. Taylor fumbled in the game, which almost cost them the game. Actually, it did cost them the game. So Damien Harris, I know the rushing numbers don't look great. They've obviously trended down the entire time. But if we get workloads like he had against Miami and workloads like we had against the New York Jets in this spot against Houston, which they should win, I think that Damien Harris is a wonderful sleeper option as of Monday.
Yep, I would tend to agree.
Fournette, very good option against Miami. Ronald Jones is non-existent in this Bucks offense. It's like 80 to 20. You could even argue it's 90-10. And we need to monitor, obviously, if Gio Bernard is going to be playing in this spot. But I love Leonard Fournette. We saw the Jonathan Taylor absolutely destroy this defense last week. Tampa Bay's at home. And I think that based off last night's performance, they're going to do everything that they can to just run the ball into the hands of Leonard Fournette. So yeah, I like that play quite a bit too. So many running backs on the week. I wish we could play more than 3. So anything that you are seeing from that angle, we can continue to move down the list here once we get to P. Ryan.
Yeah, I really like the Leonard Fournette play, but don't count out Ronald Jones just quite yet, Jared. We saw him score a touchdown yesterday, so you can't
Fair
completely
enough.
count him out of this offense. If he's gonna steal touchdowns like that, then you do get a little bit scared. But like you got to remember, this Miami team. I think this is. I'm trying to think of who the team was last year. Was it the Packers that we tried to? I don't know. Whatever team you would say we targeted running backs against the most, I think that's what this Miami team classifies as this year. We saw what they did against Jonathan Taylor yesterday. We saw what Peyton Barber was able to do to them a week ago. He was able to have 23 rushing attempts for 111 yards and a touchdown. That was Peyton Barber. Like that makes me laugh because it's Peyton Barber in 2021. Like I think anyone's going to be able to have success against this Miami defense when it comes to the running game, and Leonard Fournette is up next.
Yeah, agreed. They are definitely a streamer option for running backs. Lots of dudes, lots of different ways you can approach it, which is more of a reason to not necessarily go up and pay for Derrick Henry. But obviously, we have to keep going and taking a look at these other running backs. Under 6K, guys that stand out to me. One obviously is Trey Sermon. The other, we'll have to see what's going on with the. I don't really want to touch the Denver. I don't know. I mean, Pittsburgh is not as good of a defense as we had, as they usually are. So, I mean, but at the same time, Melvin Gordon doesn't have an injury tag at the moment. We'll see what happens with the rest of the week there. Kenneth Gainwell sitting at 5,700 against Carolina. Tony Pollard, really good price tag at 5,600. And then we get to our guy, Samaje Perine at 5,600. So I was hoping that actually would be a little bit cheaper. What's your thoughts there if we get Perine against Green Bay with no Mixon?
I think it's a fine price tag. I worry. I think it might be a situation where they just rely on throwing the ball more.
Yep.
Um, which I mean, they're going to be behind. It's going to be a negative game script for this Cincy team anyway. So like, I think they could just end up doing what they kind of did last year, where I forget who exactly was the backup for the Cincinnati team when it came to the end of the year when Joe Mixon was hurt. But instead of seeing them give it to the backup, they ended up just throwing the ball a ton. So I feel like that could definitely be a case for this Bengals team.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that you would see them probably lean on the pass more. They'll probably give P Ryan 10 to 15 touches, but does that really give him the leg up to guys that are just maybe like 500 to 1,000 more than him, like a Leonard Fournette, like a Damien Harris, like DeAndre Swift? I mean, right now, Melian would say no. There's too many other really good running back spots. Um, but I think that you can consider P Ryan for tournaments if we get the news that that Mixon's going to be out. Any other things that you want to look at in terms of running backs? We're kind of getting into the not like you can't play any of these guys territory.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone down here that I would consider playing. Um, this is more of a DK question, I guess, and I would be interested to see his price tag over on DK. But Brandon Bolden was included a lot,
He
and
was.
he is the new James White of this offense.
Yep.
So I would be interested to see his price tag over on DK. But again, that's a DK point,
Yep.
not a FanDuel point.
Yep, and good point that you bring up. We are going to be doing the DraftKings first look. Instead of Tuesday, we'll be doing it on Wednesday this week due to some housekeeping. So we'll get to that conversation middle of the week here. But right now on FanDuel, he's 4,900. So, I mean, I'm not going out of my way to do that. But I think DraftKings is fine, especially if we get some good pricing on him, which we should because this slate was already out before the game happened. Thoughts on McKissick? Gibson won't be able to run on New Orleans, so they'll most likely use him in the passing game more than normal.
Say that, but like we saw Barkley was just fine in the running game yesterday. So like
Good point.
I mean Barkley, Gibson, like you're kind of weighing oranges and apples in all honesty, but like I think McKissick is fine there. I think McKissick is going to be a good play. We saw that a reason that Barkley was able to hit that point where he was able to be of value at his price tag was because he was included in the passing game, right? He ended up having, I think, like 5 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown. So, I don't know. I think McKissick is just fine at the price tag he's at. And I think that Ron Rivera might be willing to lean on him more and more, especially when he sees him come up in clutch moments like he did yesterday.
Yeah, I agree. I never touch JD McKissick on FanDuel, so that's a complete stay away from me. But we'll have to see what his price is on DraftKings. Let's move on and talk, unless you have any other running backs. Lots of running backs in play this week, so let's just keep it there. Any last guy you want to talk about?
Nope. Let's move on to wide receiver.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if it's as good of a spot for wide receivers as it is for running backs this week. We have Devante Adams at the top. Only got $100 price bump. He was 8,100 yesterday in week 4. Now in week 5, he's 8,200 going up against Cincinnati. Obviously, we did not get the Devante Adams game that we all were hoping for yesterday, but still got 11 targets. And I think that he was looked at a few times for the red zone touches and red zone targets, but they all went to Randall Cobb this week. So that's interesting. I noticed that they are in place of MVS right now, who was dealing with an injury last week. I think he's on the IR and he's going to miss this one too. So they've been using Devante Adams. They'll move him around everywhere, but they were using him a lot yesterday on the outside and putting Randall Cobb in the slot. And that's kind of where Adams used to eat and still does. Any concerns there against Cincinnati in this spot?
I don't think there's any concerns. I would have to look at matchups to see where these Cincy corners are lining up and what they're looking like so far this year. But all I know is that Adams is nearly always going to be in play, just because, especially on FanDuel where he has that touchdown equity.
Yep.
We haven't seen it this year. He's only had one receiving touchdown, but I think that's just bound to turn around, right? Like,
It is
this
certainly
is the guy
bound.
who can. Yep. He has had the worst touchdown variance on, or one of the worst touchdown variances on the season. I expect that to be positive in the upcoming weeks, and this is a prime spot to do it against Cincinnati, who, off the top of my head, I can't think of a single good corner on that team.
Yep, the only good one is Awuzie, who missed last week against Jacksonville. So we'll see how that pans out. But for Adams, he's going to get, the touchdown regression is going to come back. I think he's a fine option this week, and I think that he's going to be quite popular. So Justin Jefferson against Detroit. Don't know why the opponent ranking for Detroit is where it is. That's hilarious. DJ Moore torched Darius Slay in the secondary. Tyreek Hill torched the Philly secondary. DJ Moore torch. He did really well against Dallas. I wouldn't say torch, but he was open quite a bit. These receivers are very, very interesting this week. First of all, we don't have a guy above 8,200, which seems to happen every single week. And now you have the top like 4 receivers that are in really, really good spots. I'm not going to include Mike Williams because I think the spot's a little bit less for him. But Debo sitting at 7,700. Does that surprise you?
Completely shocked. I laugh a little bit just because I was so off of Debo at the beginning of the season when we did season-long talks. Like, I was just like, this guy had a huge injury. Usually when players have this injury, they don't come back really well. We saw that with trying to think of his name. I think Trent Taylor was our other wide receiver that had the same exact injury and just was never the same when it came to his running ability. But let me see if I can find this tweet that I saw earlier today about Debo. It was just the fact, like, what is Debo first in when it comes to all the stats that he's had recently?
Yeah,
it's been
at one point,
absolutely insane.
Yeah, through 2 weeks, it was definitely up at the top. It might be up at the top now with the massive game that he had yesterday.
Yeah, here we go. So Debo Samuel leads the NFL in the following categories: total yards, yards per reception, yards after catch per reception, yards per route run, missed tackles forced as well. So, like,
that's
the
wild.
guy's been an absolute animal. And I think he's I'm not going to go that far quite yet. I'm not going to say he's matchup proof, but I am going to say this is another good spot where I don't think the Cardinals' pass defense is all that and more. And also, it seems like him and Lance are really connected as, like, Debo's going to be the top guy there.
That's my main concern and main focus. And it was alleviated by the fact that Lance had 2 passing touchdowns. Both of them were to Debo Samuel. So, do you think that, one, that just tells me that it's a young QB looking at his first read and throwing it to him, right? Like, I don't think there's any dispute there. Like, is Debo the number 1 read in all of this? Because I think the answer is yes.
Yes, I do. Or he's at least 1A to George Kittle's 1B.
Right. And I mean, Kittle, there's regression coming for him too. Like, he had a poor game, even though he ran a ton of routes in that
Yeah,
come from behind win.
and had
So
11 targets with 4 receptions.
right, so you're expecting to get a little bit more. That's kind of a floor spot for Kittle. So I don't think we need to overreact on that one. Debo Samuel might come back to earth a little bit, but I think that he's definitely in play for tournaments. Okay,
Hmm.
let's go down here. Um, I think Chris Godwin should bounce back from what was a pedestrian day for him. Tampa Bay is always going to be Tampa Bay. They're going to throw it to a billion guys. With Gronk out, they definitely focused more on the run game as well as Mike Evans, which is not surprising either. Scotty Miller being out definitely limits I mean, I don't know. It doesn't limit the offense. It's just uh, I was hoping that it would be more concentration for everybody, but Antonio Brown being there definitely soaked up some targets. Tom Brady seems to be looking for Antonio Brown a lot. So Chris Godwin stays the GPP play for me at 7,600. Uh, Anybody that's interesting for you for cash off of the first look here for this range, 7K.
Um, above 7K. Is that the number we're setting this at?
Yes.
Not really. I mean, I feel like you have to have one of these guys up top. So like, I think DJ Moore is in a good spot. We just saw Hill burn this team when it comes to like a wide receiver one. I think Moore's kind of in that same spot. I like JJ as well. I like. I don't mind Adam Thielen as well, but like these other options are in tough matchups. Like Jamar Chase definitely could get Alexander coverage this week. Um, Hopkins might be in a good spot actually against San Fran. I don't mind it if you're pairing him up with Kyler, but we haven't seen him do a lot over the past few weeks, which kind of does scare me. The fact that he doesn't have over 6 receptions is what scares me about him. So I don't know. I don't see anything really popping out for cash, which might make me lean towards actually playing Derrick Henry because, like we said, this seems like maybe it's a little bit more of a pay down position.
It kind of feels like that a little bit, but we'll see. Yeah, okay. Let's go down a little bit. I mean, Terry McLaurin, you don't really want to go there necessarily. Big coming off a big game. Obviously, the Atlanta matchup was much better. One of these Vikings receivers, I feel like is going to go off. So it's kind of my early note just for that. I think they're both in tournament spots. Jamar Chase, very priced up at 7,300, coming off of not as inspiring performance. Eventually, we knew that the touchdowns were going to regress for Jamar Chase. If T. Higgins is out again, that's the big question. Do you run anything back with the Bengals receivers against the Packers, who should be down?
Sorry, can you repeat that for me? I was looking at a message from Sean.
Yeah, the if T. Higgins is out, he's questionable right now, but that would mean he would miss 3 weeks in a row. Do you look at these Bengals, or is Jamar Chase too expensive on FanDuel? Because I think he is a little bit up there.
I think he's probably a little up there on FanDuel in all
Yep.
honesty at that price tag.
It's worth noting that Jair Alexander did get hurt towards the end of the game yesterday. I think it was. We'll see. I'm not going to make any assumptions on that just yet because it's way too early to think about it. But that could be interesting. Okay, let's move on and talk about guys in the 6K range. Anything that stands out to you there? Obviously, it's headlined by the three guys that have injuries. Two of them on the Titans, the other T. Higgins. You have Marvin Jones against Tennessee without DJ Chark. Any love for Marvin?
Um, I think I have more interest in Chenault. I just think that this price tag at 6.6 is a little bit scary for me with Marvin Jones, but I know this is going past our 6K range talk, but Chenault's at 5,800.
Yep.
I kind of like the price tag on Chenault a lot more.
It's good. It's a good price tag. We saw what this team was kind of looking like without DJ Chark, as he got, we have a pretty good sample size, at least 3/4 of that for him. So yeah, I definitely don't mind it. We also saw the receivers for the Jets go ballistic against this Tennessee secondary. So if they still have the guys out that they do, man, it's going to be we might be firing up some Jacksonville stacks this week. Let's see here. Do we have any interest in the Giants receivers if a guy like Sterling Shepard's back in the mix?
Um, I would say as of right now, no, unless you're stacking them with Daniel Jones. But I don't know how I feel about that spot against the Dallas defense. I think Galladay's going to be completely out of play just because I do think he ends up getting that Diggs coverage, and Diggs has been such a monster on Dallas this season. But maybe if Shepard is back, then we can consider him. I would be scared about what he looks like off of the injury, though.
Yep, yep. Tyler Boyd's sitting here at 63. And then, I mean, there's not really much that I like. All these are kind of tournament plays. Man, do we any love for Brandon Cooks possibly? There's a little bit of a narrative there.
Yeah, I would say no for me, but I mean, if you want to go for it, then go for it. I just don't think I'm target after seeing what happened last night with this New England team. I mean, I know that's kind of Belichick in his prime against Brady. I know he probably cares about that matchup the most this season, unless they do make it to the playoffs. I don't think I'd be taking anyone against that New England team.
Yeah, and I know I think that the more real narrative is Brandon Cooks versus the Saints. Like that one definitely is a thing that you need to pay attention to. But well, yeah, we'll see. He did get a nice discount off of last week though. All right, under 6K receivers. We'll have to keep an eye on Chase Claypool. Tough matchup. Don't really want to do that in the first place, but uh, we can talk about a guy that looked decent last night and actually did a pretty good job throwing the ball. Jacoby Myers at 5,900 threw a few passes last night that ended up being pretty big plays for the Patriots. Who knew that they had that in their arsenal? Jacoby Myers is 5,900 against the Houston Texans. Could it be a spot where you pay up for Adams and maybe go to a guy like Jacoby Myers and Laviska Shenault?
Potentially, I think that you could buy into something like that. Didn't Jacoby wasn't did Jacoby get injured at some point
He
last night?
did. He did.
And he just came back and he was fine, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Well, then I was going to say maybe you worry about the injury a little bit, but still, if you are playing Mac, I think Jacoby's definitely in play. And we're seeing that target share grow into the double digits over the past 2 weeks. And again, it's another spot where you see a wide receiver that doesn't have a touchdown this year that definitely should have a touchdown at some point.
Yep. Let's talk about wide receivers that actually, I'm not going to say they're sneaky, but it definitely is something that we can look at. These Miami receivers, Josh, against Tampa Bay. It sounds
Yep.
really gross, but we've seen them do very, very well in spots. And Devontae Parker is sitting at 5,700, coming off of a solid game yesterday. I wish he was more efficient. That probably has a lot to do with just the Brissett thing in general. But he still got that 9 targets and a touchdown. We also saw Waddle do pretty well too. And we've seen big games, or at least big target games from Waddle. Do you pull the trigger on anything here? I mean, I don't know. I guess didn't Will Fuller get injured yesterday too?
I think he did. So if I'm going to pull the trigger anywhere, it is probably going to be on Waddle. Yeah, Fuller's considered week to week with a finger injury right now. So
Yep.
because we know Waddle can have those monster games target wise, I think that's where I would end up leaning probably.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Could be, I'm not going to say cash viable just yet, but it's a very, very interesting bring back spot against a secondary who lost another guy in Carlton Davis, actually 2 guys last night. So I don't know how they're going to do anything. We'll see. And Richard Sherman kind of looks like I'm not going to say a shell of himself, but it's definitely not the elite Sherman anymore. Okay. Anything else down here? We usually never target any of these guys. And again, it panned out yesterday that the Nick Westbrook, Hakeem, Chalk completely busted. It was actually more Chester Rogers than anybody else. So anything down here underneath 5,500?
Yeah, probably not. I don't want to tout Chester Rogers. It just doesn't sound like a fun day at the office. And I guess it'd probably be more of a DK play than anything,
Yep.
depending on his price tag over there. But at least interesting to keep note of. We saw Ross have that huge touchdown this week. Um, so again, if we're targeting those Giants guys,
Yeah.
then I thought of us talking about John Ross as soon
Oh
as I
yeah.
saw that touchdown. I was like, oh, fucking course John Ross had to do it. And then also, I think that you will see this 49ers team play a lot faster paced offense with Lance at the helm. If that's the case, then I would consider Ayuk as a stacking option if you are playing Lance.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, that John Ross touchdown was amazing. Anyway, let's talk about tight end here. I think that we're gonna have a really, really juicy position, or maybe not. So let's see. Darren Waller against Chicago, probably the clear cash game option if I had to pick one, just because of the amount of things that Waller can do. Now, people might get a little bit scared depending on what happens tonight, so we'll have to wait and see what happens tonight for Waller. But I think he's probably the best play here. And with the amount of running backs everywhere and the amount of receivers that we like in the lower pay down range, it kind of feels like you can go Waller fairly easily.
Yeah, definitely feels like you can go to Waller fairly easily. So I like Waller, that price tag. I still like Kittle at that price tag too of 6,500.
Yep.
I can't believe that Dalton Schultz is above 6K. Like what? Like when did that happen? That's absolutely insane to see him above 6K. But he just keeps on catching touchdowns. So like,
Yep.
what are your thoughts on the rest of the above 6K guys?
Yeah, so I think he's clearly, positioned himself above Blake Jarwin, even though Blake Jarwin did get a touchdown as well. So Dak likes
Yep,
throwing to his tight ends. It's a really good spot for Dallas. I think that you can definitely target Dalton Schultz here. GPPs only, because this touchdown regression is definitely not happening every single week. So I like Schultz. I think he's fine. They haven't needed to pass the last 2 weeks, but they still continue to do so around the red zone. So Schultz is going to be that guy. He's going to be, I'm not going to say Gronk type level, but he is definitely a boomer bust touchdown option around the goal line, especially. And I know Amari Cooper got a touchdown, but he was dealing with injuries too most of the week and during the game. So yeah, it's going to be Zeke, and then it's going to be Schultz who they look at for these red zone scores.
for sure. I think it's interesting to see Schultz up there. I don't know if I'm willing to play it, but I do think it is definitely interesting.
Yep, saw Dallas Goddard had a big game last week or yesterday against the Chiefs, and I say big, but he was just really efficient.
Yep.
5 for 5 with 56 and a touchdown. So yeah, I think that he's certainly in play for tournaments. The price tag is a little bit higher than I would like it to be. Rob Gronkowski should already be ruled out. He has a punctured lung and several broken or fractured ribs, so he's not playing. We can talk about the tight ends, but they're probably just DraftKings only type of plays. Anything that you want to talk about in this just tight end position in general?
No, if I'm
Yeah,
gonna be honest, it's
exactly.
really ugly once you get down here, man. Like,
Yep.
you're looking at some of these plays, at least for like a FanDuel perspective, like Evan Ingram, no. Tyler Conklin, actually, Conklin's probably a maybe considering the matchup, but at the
Yep.
end of the day, probably no. Ricky Seals Jones, maybe a value play considering that we know that Logan Thomas is going to be week to week with the hamstring injury.
Yep.
Um, Maybe one of these New England guys like Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry, just
Yeah.
because we saw them both get targeted in bunches last week and they are going up against Houston. But that exasperated sigh that you just had is exactly how I feel as I'm listing these guys' names off. Like, I don't want any of this, not a single bit of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, the Patriots, of course, had to sign two tight ends that do the exact same thing. And they're going to use
Yep.
them in this kind of thing where, like, one's going to go off, one's not going to go off. One's going to be blocking primarily, the other one's going to be receiving. And they just cancel each other out. So, do you really want to pay this price tag to hope for a touchdown and hope it's the right dude? No. So, maybe in tournaments you're fine. This is probably the only week that you really want to do that against Houston. So, if you want, take take your pick, flip a coin, hope it lands on the guy that you want. Uh, so the one guy we might be able to count on a little bit more though is Dan Arnold, because even with only being on the team for 3 weeks, he still was on the field a ton against the Bengals on Thursday. Any thoughts for Dan Arnold here against Tennessee?
Yeah, at least in play, just because of the matchup again against Tennessee. That offense or that defense is horrible. So, like, I don't mind it. I'm not in love with it though. Definitely not going to emphasize it whatsoever. Get behind it fully, and especially on FanDuel, not going to get behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Desert Zombie says he loves the dual tight end sets. Dual tight end sets are the reason I'm awake at night. Uh, so I try to never target a guy from that kind of thing. We were hoping that we would see more Ferkser yesterday because of the amount of targets that are just left on the table from the Titans receivers. Only got 5 targets in that game in a spot where they actually were playing from behind in for most of it. This is gross. So I think it's just Darren Waller or bust on FanDuel.
Yeah, most likely.
Okay, let's talk about defense here and wrap this baby up. New England Patriots are 5K against Houston. Very, very solid spot to attack there. Tampa Bay 4,800 against Miami. Also incredible. Well, I don't know. I mean, I take New England over Tampa Bay here, me personally.
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
so, do we feel like it's a pay up option? And if so, is it just New England?
Yeah, it's just New England. And honestly, if we've seen anything from the last 2 weeks, you just take the defense that's going up against Houston, man. Or you
Yeah.
take this high price defense, right? Because last week we saw it or this recent week we saw it with the Bills. They were able to absolutely dominate against that.
Yeah.
That I wonder. Do you know how many points they scored yesterday?
It was certainly double digits, and I want to say it was like 17.
Yeah, so 17 points from your defense. That's definitely paying it off. Um, and I feel like the Patriots could do even better, in all honesty. So I like this Patriots team when it comes to playing up against Houston. And then probably the only pay up spot that I'd be willing to take. Like anything else pop out to you above 4,500?
The Raiders against a possible Justin Fields spot. That would be pretty
Yeah,
much it for me. Maybe I can get behind. Well, I actually can get behind Denver. Um, the one concern is it's at Heinz Field, but Ben Roethlisberger, uh, yeah, they just don't have it this year. He doesn't have it anymore. Um, so that's where I don't know. Raiders and Broncos are fine for tournaments, but if you're, I don't know, if you're, why not just get the extra $600 and get New England against Houston? That just seems like a home run to me.
yeah.
Uh, and what new Bill Belichick is always notorious for taking one guy out of the game, and if he takes Brandon Cooks out, it's over. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
over.
more than over, dude. It's gonna be a You thought this week was bad for David Mills. Like you think next week is gonna be even worse.
Yep, yep. This could be another week where Houston scores less than 10 points or even puts up a zero again. So we will see. Anything below 4,300 standouts. I guess I'm not touching Tennessee probably the entire season. Um, any love for anything? Maybe a Green Bay play, maybe a Dallas Cowboys play. I don't know. I mean, I think this is kind of a pay up spot. I don't see even any defenses that I like paying down for.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing a lot of trouble in this spot of pay down defenses. I think you're kind of running into an issue with any of these teams. Maybe we just keep targeting against Tennessee and go the Jags. Like I don't know. I feel like that's even a stretch when it comes to these low priced options for defense.
Chat saying Jacksonville defense. I can get behind that. We played the Jets yesterday. I don't have an issue with that. That's probably the one team where I can be like, okay, you can do that. People will play the Giants defense for some reason because they always seem to do that too, which is weird. They played the Giants defense yesterday. Um, I think the only pay down acceptable is Jacksonville, which sounds gross, but again, the Jets sounded pretty gross yesterday too, and they came in at 40% owned.
Yeah, and was what, like 7 points too, right? Like they
Yep,
ended up being way more than positive. They looked really good yesterday, actually, from a DFS perspective.
they did. Lots of sacks, and if Tennessee has any issues on their offensive line, they're going to continue to give up sacks. So yeah, I mean Jacksonville or the Patriots. That's pretty much the two ways that I would go early on here. Any final notes in regards to this Week 5 slate? Very, very interesting. Much better than last week.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a good week. I think that after going through everything, you're kind of realizing that the running back position is going to be the best position when it
Yep.
comes to plays, and it's going to be a fun week. I have a good feeling about it.
It will be another week of do we play Derrick Henry or not, and we'll
Mhm.
see how it goes because there's a lot of information that still needs to come out, and honestly, we can't make any decisions just like last week until Sunday morning. So this is a great tool, a great way to get yourself introduced to the slate. But keep in mind that it is Monday, and 6 days is forever in the NFL world. So there will be news that changes everything. So please don't use our takes from today and use them religiously. They will adjust as we have to adjust, as the news comes in. So let's move on back here to the